I don't really know when it started, or maybe it's always been there. This quiet feeling that lingers in the background of my days. Some people call it loneliness. But the thing about loneliness is, it doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides behind laughter, behind busy schedules, behind the glow of a phone screen filled with conversations that don't really mean anything. I used to think loneliness only happened when you were physically alone, like sitting in a quiet room with no one around. But the truth is, I've felt my deepest loneliness in the middle of crowded rooms, surrounded by friends, surrounded by laughter, surrounded by people who would swear they know me, and yet it felt like no one really saw me. It's strange, isn't it? How you can be loved and still feel unseen. How you can talk all day, but still crave a conversation that actually touches your soul. That's the kind of loneliness no one really talks about, because it's not as simple as being alone. It's about not feeling understood. It's about carrying so much inside you, but never finding the right moment or the right person to let it out. There were nights when I would stare at the ceiling for hours, feeling this heavy emptiness inside me. Not sadness exactly, not boredom either. Just a kind of quiet ache. Like something was missing. Like a piece of me was wandering somewhere out there, searching for a home, searching for someone who could recognize it. The hardest part, loneliness makes you doubt yourself. You start to wonder, is it me? Am I too complicated? Too much? Too quiet? Too different? And when the silence of the night amplifies those thoughts, you can almost convince yourself that maybe, just maybe, you really are invisible. I remember one night scrolling endlessly through my phone, chat after chat, timeline after timeline. People posting pictures with friends, family gatherings, late-night drives, couples holding hands under city lights. And all I could think was, where do I belong in all of this? Why do I feel like an outsider looking in? Loneliness is tricky like that. It makes you feel guilty for feeling it. Like you shouldn't complain because technically you're not alone. You have friends, you have family, you have people you can text. And yet the hollowness stays, no matter how many good morning texts or heart emojis fill your screen. Sometimes I wonder if loneliness is just part of being human, a silent companion we all carry but never admit to. Because admitting it feels like weakness, like failure, like saying, I'm not enough, I'm missing something. But here's what I've come to realize. Loneliness doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're craving something deeper, something real, something beyond small talk and shallow interactions. Loneliness is not the absence of people, it's the absence of connection. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it hurts so much. The thing about loneliness is that it's not just an emotion. It's a weight, a heaviness that doesn't just stay in your chest. It seeps into your bones, your routines, your thoughts. I used to ask myself, why does it hurt this much? Why does being lonely feel heavier than sadness itself? And after a long time of sitting with it, I think I know. Loneliness isn't just about being without people. It's about being without meaning. See, human beings were never built to exist in isolation. From the very beginning, connection has been our survival tool. We needed each other to hunt, to protect, to share warmth, to share stories by the fire. So when that connection is missing, even in a world full of people, it feels unnatural. It feels like something inside us is starving. That's why loneliness doesn't just stay in your mind. It affects everything. It makes mornings heavier. It makes your favorite songs sound different. It makes simple conversations feel exhausting. It can even creep into your health, making you tired, restless, or unable to sleep. And the worst part, it convinces you that you're the only one feeling this way. I remember reading once that loneliness activates the same part of the brain as physical pain. And when I think about it, it makes sense. Because there were nights when it really did feel like pain. Not a sharp, obvious kind of pain, but a dull ache that never goes away. Like carrying a backpack full of rocks wherever you go. And the more you carry it, the more invisible you feel. Loneliness has this cruel way of making you believe that no one cares, even when they do. Even when people text you, invite you, check on you, the voice in your head whispers, "They don't really mean it. You don't really matter." That voice is dangerous because it keeps you from reaching out. It tells you to stay quiet, to smile when you're hurting, to say, "I'm fine," when your chest is screaming for connection. And that's what makes loneliness so complicated. It's not just the absence of people, it's the presence of fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being a burden, fear of being rejected if you show the rawest parts of yourself. So you hide. You bury the ache under work, under distractions, under endless scrolling and half-hearted conversations. You keep moving, keep smiling, keep pretending because the world doesn't really have space for loneliness, does it? We celebrate happiness, success, love stories, friendships, but we rarely talk about what happens in between. The nights when you're lying awake wondering if anyone out there feels the way you do. And that's the cruel irony. Everyone feels it at some point. Everyone. But because we don't talk about it, we all walk around thinking we're the only ones. That's why it hits so hard. Because loneliness is not just an emotion, it's a silence. A silence that convinces you that your voice doesn't matter, that your existence doesn't echo in anyone else's life. And when that silence becomes too loud, it starts to shape the way you see yourself. You stop believing you're worth listening to. You stop believing anyone could really understand you. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start fading into the background of your own life. That's the weight of loneliness, not just emptiness, but invisibility. There's one night that always comes back to me whenever I think about loneliness. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing terrible happened. In fact, it was just an ordinary Saturday night. But sometimes, ordinary nights carry the heaviest memories. I remember being invited to a friend's gathering, a birthday, I think. The kind where music plays in the background, people are laughing, drinking, sharing stories, taking endless photos. On the outside, I was part of it, smiling, clapping, singing along to Happy Birthday. But inside, it was like I was standing on the other side of a glass wall. I could see everyone, I could hear their voices, but I couldn't feel connected to any of it. I kept laughing at the right times, nodding during conversations, even making jokes, and yet I felt like a ghost in the room, present, but not really there. At one point, I stepped outside. The air was cooler, quieter. I sat on the edge of the sidewalk, looking up at the night sky. Cars passed by, strangers walked down the street, their lives moving forward, connected in ways I couldn't touch. And in that moment, a thought hit me so hard it almost knocked the breath out of me. I've never felt more alone when I'm surrounded by people. It sounds ironic, right? But it's true. Because loneliness isn't about having people around. It's about feeling seen, feeling understood. And that night, Even though I was physically surrounded, I felt invisible. I went home later, scrolling through the pictures people had posted from the party. My face was in some of them, smiling, holding a drink, standing with friends. To anyone looking, it would seem like I was having fun, like I belonged. But the truth, I couldn't recognize the person in those photos. The smile looked forced, the eyes looked distant. It was like watching a stranger pretend to be me. That night, when I lay down in bed, the silence felt unbearable. I stared at my phone, wanting to text someone, anyone, but I didn't. Because who do you text at midnight to say, I feel so alone, and I don't know why? So instead, I just lay there, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan, the distant sound of motorcycles outside, the quiet ache inside my chest. I kept thinking, maybe tomorrow will be different. Maybe tomorrow I'll feel like I belong again. But tomorrow came, and the loneliness was still there. And I think that's the scariest part about it. It doesn't go away just because the night ends. It follows you into the morning, into your routines, into your coffee cup, your commute, your conversations. It sits with you at work. It eats lunch with you. It whispers when you're trying to sleep. That night taught me something I didn't want to admit. Sometimes loneliness doesn't need a reason. It doesn't wait for a heartbreak or a goodbye or an empty room. Sometimes it just shows up, like an uninvited guest that refuses to leave. And all you can do is learn to live with it until you find a way to gently let it go. It's strange how loneliness can make you feel isolated, but at the same time, it can also make you hyper-aware of others. You start noticing little things. The way someone's smile falters for a second too long, the way a friend laughs a little too loudly, maybe to cover something inside, the way strangers on the subway stare at their phones, headphones in, creating their own bubble of quiet desperation. I've realized something. Everyone is carrying something. Everyone has nights where they scroll through social media, seeing everyone else's lives in vivid color, while theirs feels like a black and white photograph fading at the edges. Everyone feels unseen sometimes. Everyone has a piece of themselves that they don't share. One afternoon, I was at a cafe, sipping a latte, trying to write something, anything. I noticed the couple at the next table. They were talking, laughing, leaning into each other, but there was a moment when both of them went quiet. And in that pause, I saw it. A flicker of uncertainty, a hint of loneliness hiding behind comfort. And I thought, maybe even people who look happy aren't immune to this feeling. And that's the truth. Loneliness doesn't care about appearances. You could be a CEO, a parent, a social butterfly, and still feel like no one truly sees you. You could live in a bustling city surrounded by millions of people and feel like the world forgot your name. The more I observed, the more I realized how connected we all are through this shared experience. And oddly, that thought gave me some comfort. If everyone feels this way at times, then maybe it's not a personal failure. Maybe it's just human. I've even started noticing small acts of invisible kindness. A smile from a stranger who senses you're having a tough day. A text from a friend who checks in without you asking. The barista remembering your usual order. Little threads of connection that remind you you're not entirely alone. You just have to notice them. Loneliness is heavy, yes, but it's also a reminder that connection matters, that it's precious, that even small gestures, small acknowledgments can make the difference between feeling invisible and feeling seen. And sometimes just noticing someone else's quiet struggle
is enough to remind you that you are not alone either.
There are nights when loneliness doesn't just whisper, it roars. It fills every corner of your mind with a kind of weight that makes even breathing feel heavy. And it's in those nights that you start to question everything: your choices, your worth, your place in the world. I remember one night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and feeling like my chest was a locked room and I had lost the key. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but the words wouldn't come. I thought about reaching out, but I feared bothering them, feared being dismissed, feared being too much. So I stayed silent, holding on to the ache, letting it sit with me like an unwelcome guest who refuses to leave. Loneliness can make you feel unsafe in your own skin. It can make you feel like an intruder in your own life. You start wondering if you were ever meant to feel joy, or if happiness is just something that happens to other people. It's not sadness. It's something more nuanced. A deep, quiet gnawing. A shadow stretching across your heart, whispering, "No one will ever truly see you." And yet, in the darkest moments, there's also clarity. A brutal, painful kind of clarity. Because when everything is stripped away, the distractions, the noise, the people, you're left with yourself. And that self, unguarded and raw, can be terrifying, but also profoundly real. I've learned that these nights, as unbearable as they feel, are also the nights where you face the truth of your own humanity. You realize that the ache isn't because you're broken, it's because you're alive, sensitive and capable of depth. It's because you feel things fully, even when the world seems indifferent. There were moments when I cried silently in the dark, wishing for a hand to hold, a voice to comfort, a presence that said, "You are not alone." And in those moments, I discovered something strange. Even in isolation, you can find fragments of resilience. Even when no one else reaches out, you can begin to hold yourself with tenderness. The truth is, loneliness can hurt like nothing else, but it also teaches you how to sit with yourself, how to recognize your own needs, how to nurture the part of you that the world often overlooks. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all, that even in the absence of others, you can start learning to be a companion to yourself. It took me a long time to realize something simple yet profound. Loneliness is not the enemy. For so many years, I fought it, tried to fill it with noise, with people, with distractions, thinking that if I could just be busy enough, the feeling would disappear. But it never really did. And then, one day, I decided to stop resisting. I allowed myself to feel it fully, without judgment, without trying to fix it immediately. I sat with it. I named it. I acknowledged its presence. Yes, I am lonely. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it is real. That act alone, simply recognizing it, was transformative. Because the moment you stop running, the moment you stop pretending that everything is fine, you start to understand the language of your own heart. You start to hear what it truly needs. I began journaling my thoughts at night, writing without concern for grammar or coherence. I let my pen spill out the ache, the questions, the uncertainties. Slowly, I realized that by expressing my loneliness, it started to lose its power over me. By naming it, I could look at it as a part of me, rather than a force controlling me. I also started noticing the small connections I'd overlooked: a smile from a neighbor, a short message from an old friend, even the simple acknowledgement of a stranger in a cafe. Each tiny gesture reminded me that I am not invisible. I am seen, even if only in fleeting, imperfect ways. Accepting loneliness doesn't mean giving up on connection. It means understanding that your value isn't measured by how full your social calendar is. It means recognizing that being alone with yourself, truly alone, can be a place of growth, reflection, and even tenderness. I remember lying on my bed one night, feeling the quiet all around me, and instead of resisting it, I let it wash over me. I felt the ache, I felt the emptiness, and I whispered to myself, "It's okay. You are allowed to feel this. You are allowed to be you, even in the silence." And in that moment, I realized that loneliness, while painful, is also a doorway to understanding yourself, to finding the things that truly matter, to cultivating a sense of inner presence that no external validation can provide. Loneliness doesn't have to be a void. It can be a mirror, a teacher, a quiet companion that, when understood, can guide you toward deeper self-awareness and resilience. Understanding loneliness is one thing. Learning to live with it, to soften its edges, is another. It's not a quick fix. There is no magic solution. But there are small steps, gentle, patient, persistent, that can make a difference. First, I started to prioritize presence over distraction. Instead of scrolling endlessly through social media or numbing myself with noise, I began to sit quietly, to breathe, to notice what I was feeling. I'd light a candle, play soft music, or simply stare out the window at the night sky. In that quiet, I began to recognize that my loneliness was not a punishment. It was an invitation to reconnect with myself. I also learned the power of small, intentional connections, sending a thoughtful message, calling someone not out of obligation, but because I wanted to connect, even if briefly. Reaching out to old friends, joining communities or groups where people share similar interests or struggles. These tiny gestures remind you that connection is possible, even if it's not perfect. Another thing I discovered is the importance of creative expression. Writing, drawing, making music, or even speaking out loud to myself. It doesn't matter what form it takes. Expressing the feelings of loneliness allows them to exist outside of my mind, to become something tangible that I can observe, rather than something that overwhelms me internally. I also began practicing self-compassion. When the ache of loneliness hit, instead of criticizing myself, I'd gently say, "It's okay to feel this. You're not failing. You're human." That shift from self-criticism to self-kindness was subtle, but it changed the way I experienced those heavy nights. And slowly, I noticed change. Not overnight, not magically, but over time, the loneliness became less of a roaring presence and more of a quiet companion. A companion I could sit with, learn from, and even find comfort in. I began to see that being alone doesn't always equal being lonely, that solitude can be restorative, that silence can be nurturing, that waiting for connection doesn't mean giving up on it. Finally, I realized the importance of perspective. Everyone carries some form of quiet struggle.
Everyone has nights when the weight of their own mind feels unbearable. Recognizing this, even just in a general sense, reminds you that you are part of a larger human experience. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are navigating a path that countless others are also walking, sometimes clumsily, sometimes in silence, but always moving forward. And sometimes that's enough. Just knowing that you are not alone in your loneliness, even if the people around you don't fully understand it, can make the ache a little lighter. Just enough to breathe, just enough to hope.
As the night stretches on and the quiet settles around you, there's a strange kind of peace in realizing this. Loneliness is not permanent. It is a visitor, not a resident. And like all visitors, it comes and goes. Sometimes it lingers longer than we want. Sometimes it catches us off guard, but it does not define the entirety of who we are. I've learned that it's okay to feel lonely, to sit with the ache, to acknowledge it, to let it speak without fear or shame. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're unworthy of love or connection. It simply means you are human, sensitive, aware, capable of deep feeling. And that's something beautiful, even if it doesn't feel that way in the moment. There is comfort in small things, in noticing the world around you, in seeing the subtle ways people care, even when they don't say it outright, in finding solace in music, in words, in art, in your own breath, in understanding that reaching out, even in tiny ways, can bridge the gap between isolation and connection. And perhaps most importantly, there is hope. Not the kind that promises a perfect, pain-free life, but the kind that reminds you you can sit with your loneliness, you can learn from it, you can grow with it, and in time, the weight begins to lift. Not because it disappears, but because you found ways to hold it gently, without letting it crush you. So tonight, if you are lying awake, feeling the familiar ache of loneliness, know this: you are not alone in feeling alone. Millions have walked this path, quietly, in the dark, and have found their way through. And so can you. Take a breath. Let the silence speak. Let the quiet remind you of your strength, your depth, your resilience. And when morning comes, remember, even after the longest night, the world is still waiting, full of small lights, small gestures, and endless possibilities for connection. You are seen, you are valued, and most of all, you are not alone.
Thanks for sticking around and listening till the end. If you've ever been through something similar or have a story that feels the same, feel free to drop it in the comments so you know you're not facing this world all alone. I'll see you in the next stories, hopefully ones that can bring you more peace and keep you company. And remember, we're all just figuring life out together. Good night.